Good morning. I, on behalf of Civil Engineers Academy and Research Center, which is a registered non-profit making society formed for the cause of civil engineers, welcomes our chief guest, Engineer Mohammad Ishfaq, IAS, DC Gurdaspur. Our key speaker, Dr. B.S. Singla, a renowned and dynamic entrepreneur who has joined NHAI and Haryana PWD and has served for NHAI in Haryana PWD. And our today's panelist is Dr. R.S. Garewal, Engineer Rajiv Ahuja ji, and Engineer V.K. Sawant. And our moderator for today's program is Engineer Indrajit Ghai. I also welcome the galaxy of today's audience attending the webinar online. They are all from all the sectors of civil engineering community, that is government officers, contractors, consultants, field engineers, students, and academicians. My special thanks to the audience who has joined from foreign countries, US, Canada, Australia, Bangladesh, UAE. There are about 250 plus participants attending this session online. Now I will request Engineer Puneet Sharma, CEO of GHAPL, to proceed ahead as per the program. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you one and all present here and attending this webinar online. The key speakers, panelists and moderator are physically available on dais and participants are attending through Zoom. The chief guest, Honorable Deputy Chief Commissioner Gurdaspur, Janab Engineer Mohammad Ishfaq, will deliver his inaugural address online. Civil Engineers Academy and Research Center C&RC holds knowledge sharing seminars, workshops and webinars every year in the month of July. In recent past, similar workshops were organized. In the year 2018, one-day workshop on planning, design and construction of elevated grade separator between Chandigarh and Kharad on 28/7/2018. And in the year 2019, one-day workshop on design of flexible pavement as per IRC 37/2018. These were physically attended by about 300 participants. In the last year 2020, this program could not hold due to COVID pandemic situation. Though the same situation still persists, yet we have organized this webinar on the topic practical troubleshooting by government authorities engineers for situation faced in time-bound infrastructure projects following the COVID protocol. Now I will request Indrajit Ghai, the moderator of today's program, to carry out the further activities. Before he starts, let me introduce Engineer Indrajit Ghai. Engineer Indrajit Ghai, a graduate civil engineer from Punjab University, Chandigarh, is the managing director of Messrs General Highways and Infracon Private Limited, an engineering consultancy firm, and chairman of Civil Engineers Academy and Research Center, a registered non-profit making society for the cause of civil engineering. After serving in the field of 15 years in the construction of infrastructure projects in India and abroad, he started his own engineering consultancy firm to provide services in the field of planning, design and construction of infrastructure projects. He is an active member of IRC H2 Committee, ISO 39001, Road Traffic Safety Management System, Lead Auditor, certified by BSI, Certified Road Safety Auditor by IRC. He is the creator and admin of two highly technical WhatsApp groups, Highway Information Group and Bridges Information Group. Over to Ghai sir now.
Thank you, Puneet. First of all, and panelists who have specially come from Gurgaon, and Dr. Garewal, he has come out of his house for the very first time after COVID. So first of all, we will honor them by presenting Gokal sir. I will request Mrs. Ghai to present the book.
Thank you.
I, on behalf of Civil Engineers Academy and Research Center, again welcome one and all on today's webinar on the topic troubleshooting by government authorities engineers in infrastructure projects. It is a practical approach. So know how to coordinate among the various people and organize this program. I wanted to have my chief guest, who is a engineer turned IAS and who also has a similar background. Then my search ended up at engineer Muhammad Ishfaq. He was engineer in Public Health Department, Punjab, and he was promoted, upgraded or selected as IAS and now presently working as Deputy Commissioner. I would request him also to share his experiences in regarding troubleshooting during his career. He is doing wonderful job during COVID also.
So, our chief guest, engineer Mohammad Ishfaq ji, he will be joining us online and he's giving his inaugural speech. Thank you.
So, very good morning to all the distinguished participants. First of all, I am very thankful for granting me this opportunity to be part of this very, very important session. It is a very healthy discussion where the government functionaries, private players, various stakeholders are joining hands and deliberating on the issues which has a very significant presence, impact on the quality, cost, and the outcome of the project. If you see in this context, for a big infrastructure project like national highways or big projects which require large chunk of land, there is always a paradox. At first instance, we need land to construct some infrastructure. At the same time, as a government, as a state, we want to acquire some private property. The assets which are created is for the benefit of everybody. But the land which is acquired is from the individual or the group of individuals. Earlier in the days, the land acquisition was not very fair to the landowners, especially for the projects which are of key importance, like defense, road, planning. So there used to be a lot of resistance by the farmers, by the landowners, because you want to take the possession of the land, somebody, you are snatching away the livelihood of the person. But after enactment of Right to Fair Compensation Act for land acquisition, now the scales are even now. So if you see the policy framework, if you see the legal framework, legislation, it has addressed a lot of issues. But still there are operational issues. Normally when you are acquiring land, you are depending upon some revenue authority who acts as a kala, who is interested with a job to acquire the land. Practically, right now we are in the process of acquiring land for Jammu-Kashmir Highway and other various important projects. The issues which impact the acquisition process are very small, but the impact is very high. For example, when you try to acquire the land, you have to finalize the alignment. So while you finalize the alignment, you see from the traffic point of view, it is the best possible alignment. But sometimes it impacts the local people in a very harsh manner. So the most key important point which I have found is, number one is that alignment should be done in a judicious manner. It should not impact the operational efficiency of the infrastructure or the road, and at the same time it should cater to the local aspirations also. Then the availability of revenue record. Because all the land assessments are being done on the basis of revenue record. National Highways always supporting the kalas by providing them manpower, retired patwaris, kanuvos, who are helping them preparing the Tatima land acquisition records. But I hope these people are not well trained. No doubt, Kalas are trained very well, but the people who are engaged in the business of preparing records are not well trained. Sometimes they are too new, just people who are computer savvy, but very little knowledge of the revenue record, or there are people who are retired, but zero knowledge of the computers, but very rich knowledge of the revenue systems. So there need to be balance. Because if the person who is entering the data into the computer, creating the Excel sheets, is not very well versed with the revenue system, they end up in creating or making false entries. For example, if property is gair mumkin, entering it as a chahi, or if it's a chahi, it's setting as a gair mumkin. So that creates a lot of problems. Third thing is, whenever you try to acquire a land, the cartels come up. The cartels will try to play with the emotions of the farmers or the landowners, and then they try to convince them we will get you the high prices. I'm telling you a very practical example. For example, we are acquiring land in some villages for this very project. The market rate for the land is around 18 lakhs per acre. And assessment by Kala as per the act is around 32 lakhs. It's a fair price. If somebody has to sell his land to them in the market, he will just fetch 18 lakhs. And government is constructing that highway and we are ready to pay him 32 lakhs. But somehow the people want 70 lakhs. And greed has no limit. So these cartels play to the greed of the people. Then they try to push the Kalas in passing the wrong orders. So uniformity in decision making by the Kalas is also impacting. For example, one Kala is very liberal or maybe hand in glove with some cartels. He may be passing orders which are not right orders. So even if you pass wrong order for 1 acre of land, it will create herd burning among the hundreds of people. We have a very critical example. Along the alignment of the road, there was one piece of land, its area was only half an acre. But since that was of some commercial importance, its assessment was around 75 lakh rupees per acre. Now everybody came that you should apply the principle of equity and they should give us 70 lakh rupees. Now if the Kala is going to accord 70 lakh rupees per acre to everybody instead of 32 lakhs, the cost to government was around 150 crores. So these are the aberrations are already there because cartels are impacting the decision making and they're delaying it also. So all these issues, and Mr. Ghai has said very clearly, need ownership at the level of the person who are at the helm of the affair. Sometimes we just read the letter, not the spirit. If you are very clear about the letter and the spirit, the works go very fast. Even people are also satisfied with you. Then principle of equity and justice. We should be fair to all. Third thing is, we must understand that if you are acquiring the land is always, you can say, have some emotional value to the families. Because that must have been acquired by their great forefathers. Now parting way with that land is always an emotional question. So these issues should be handled. Of course, money is very, very important part. But catering to the emotions, be empathetic with the people whose land you are acquiring is also very important. Sometimes we are too mechanical, we are too harsh, we are too professional. We leave our emotions out. So that is also a problematic thing. So these are the issues. Then executing contracts, even there are same issues. The contractor is coming, he's a investor, he's an entrepreneur. He invests money. First of all, he invests money by way of bid security. Then he gives you the performance security. Then he complies with all your guidelines. Then he executes some work. Then he seeks payment from you. So he's the person who's not getting a single penny from the government, apart from the cost of the work which he has done. He has the finance, which has some time value. Maybe he has obtained a loan, then he has to pay the interest to the bank, or maybe he's using own savings. Even savings also carry some time value. So this is called cost of capital. So he's paying the cost of capital. If you're delaying the payments to the contractor, or you're passing the orders and then you're not honoring them. For example, when you are visiting the site, you are passing an order, then you lack conviction, you pass verbal orders, then you don't honor them. Because the entrepreneur or the contractor, I think we shall, first of all, in our policy making, We need to change this term contractor. We need to, you can say, rechristen them as a service partners, because they are our service partners. Today, National Highway is able to build thousands of kilometers of roads. It has not been done by the engineers alone. If these contractors, these operators, the service partners were not there, we could have not constructed such a huge length of the road. So they are very, very important ingredient of our process. We should be very fair to them. So what is fairness? The fairness that we know when we are passing orders, when we are giving them directions, or we are asking them to comply with some guidelines, we must understand they are also humans. They have also families. They are also very concerned. So my only point is that if you want to implement the projects in a timely manner, fair manner, and creating good infrastructure, which should give some good service to the people, we have to be fair to every stakeholder. Few engineers I have seen, they are too much hand in glove with the contractor, and on the other side of the pendulum, there are few engineers who are too strict with them. They don't even allow the person to come and meet them. They ask them to wait for them for 2 hours along, and then they humiliate them also. Then so all nonsense of things are happening here. So we must understand today, if we want to build our nation, we have to come as a team. Our service partner, our contractors, our engineers, our junior staff, they have to act as a one team. And another point which I have understood from my experience is, sometimes we just focus on the outputs. We ignore the outcomes. For example, if you are constructing a highway, if you are constructing 100 kilometers of highway, you have achieved a good output. But that highway alignment has some faults, and it is now causing accidents. It has caused trouble to a lot of people who want to access that road. So you might have constructed a 100 kilometer of road. The output is very good, but outcome is zero. So all the projects must achieve their outcomes, not only outputs. As an engineers, somehow we ignore the outcomes. But the government is investing money, that's the people's money, that is always for the outcome. If you want to construct a 1,000 kilometer highway, it is not for the pure fun of constructing a 1,000 kilometer highway. It is for providing access, basic transport facility, faster transport services to the people. If that road is not catering to the people, that road is of no use. Similarly, you are constructing a bridge, you are constructing a hospital, you are constructing a school, the location of hospital is not good, people are not able to access it. You might be constructing a beautiful air-conditioned hospital with all the infrastructure, but who will use that? It is not accessible to everybody. So outcomes of the projects is very, very important. Then economy. Sometimes we focus too much on the cost. Sometimes we are totally, you can say, so much free and so much liberal, and we are causing the cost of the projects to be on the higher side. So the balanced approach we have to follow. The balance is only possible if your bidding process is very fair. If you are conducting the bidding process, I have done so many projects. I have done procurement of big projects also. The process which I have understood is, you cannot be in collusion with your bidders. You have to be independent, you have to be neutral, and you have to be creating a system where you are fair to everybody. You should give equal opportunities to all the eligible bidders. Provisions in the bid documents, sometimes people try to play with the eligibility conditions just to favor a few. That is the biggest mistake. We should be creating the bid documents with the conditions which should ensure enough participation, but of competent and eligible bidders. We shall not distort the conditions of the bid documents, which will favor a few or favor a one cartel. Because when we are doing the procurement, it is not like that you don't know it. You always know it, that what is happening on the ground, how people are responding to your tenders. So you always know it. Sometimes you are part of it, sometimes you are ignorant of that. So when you are doing the procurements, while the principle of neutrality, principle of equality has to be maintained, but then you should have your ears to the ground also. You must understand what people are doing, what mischief they are playing, and how are they playing. But I have understood one point in our democratic system. If you are fair, if you are transparent, nobody can push you to pass a wrong order. So my only message to everybody is that this is a welcome step which you have done. If you are fair, you are impartial, you are transparent, you are following the principle of equity and justice, you are inclusive, then every project will run through very fast. Only if you violate these principles, then you hit into troubles. I have seen many conflicting areas, like in my tenure at various places, as a director of sanitation, then as a program specialist, then as an engineer also, then as an IS officer also, as a CEO, Waqf board also. What I have seen is, if you are fair to the stakeholders, then all the difficulties, all the conflicts are resolved in a time manner. But if you are unfair to some one sector because of your own prejudices, it will hamper the impact of the progress. I happened to attend one course by representative from the CBC, Central Business Commission, Government of India. They gave a study. The people who are delaying the payments to the contractors, who delay the payments, they all end up executing the projects at least by 20 to 40% at the higher cost. Because everybody knows this officer, this project director is in the habit of delaying the payments. So they always add additional cost of capital when they are ready for that. So they have proven on the record with the case studies of big projects, the people who were able to make the faster payments, quicker payments to the bidders, they were always getting the competent rates. The people who were delaying the payments on one pretext or the other pretext, or who were delaying the decision making, like approval of the drawings, approval of the site, or any other decision making which are required for the construction implementation of the project, they always ended up executing the projects at the higher cost by a factor of 25 to 50%. So this is the cost which we could have avoided. This is a wasteful expenditure which we could have avoided. So my only message and request to every stakeholder is that we should be transparent, fair, neutral, and we should have a principle of equity, justice, and inclusiveness. With all these words, I wish very well to all the organizers, and I congratulate Mr. Ghai for organizing such a good webinar. I would have loved to be the part of this webinar for the whole time, but due to some time constraint, I may be able to join for some time. Then I will take your leave. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
You have touched the right chord, and I think you have touched almost all the points which we are going to deliberate during this webinar. So you have shared your experience very fearlessly, and you have touched each and every point, and you have shared your experience also. Once again, I am grateful to you for sharing your time from your precious schedule, and we assure you that we will touch all these issues and how these issues have been practically handled in the field. Dr. B. Singla will explain. Sir, we are going to give you a memento. Now on your behalf, I will receive that memento from the organizer and hand it over to you whenever I meet you. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. So now I will request Dr. B.S. Singla ji to give his key speak. Thank you.
Now I will request Dr. R.S. Garewal to share his views and experiences. Welcome, sir. We are not giving any formal introduction. His introduction is already there in our website also and in the brochure. He will straightway start with his experience. Welcome, sir.
Good morning. At the outset, I would like to thank Engineer I.J. Ghai for giving me this opportunity to interact with you all. Dr. B.S. Singla, in his book, Expressways in 500 Days, has given an insight into how a project can be implemented in time-bound manner, and also various difficulties that are encountered, how those could be overcome. Similar examples could also be seen in construction of Delhi Metro and some other projects, national level projects. But such projects are islands of excellence in the overall environment that is existing in the country. We need to change the work culture as far as our project implementation is concerned if we actually want to progress. So therefore, I would like to highlight certain aspects which have been covered by Dr. B.S. Singla. My main thrust will be towards the decision makers. The decision makers who are bureaucrats, the decision makers who are there to implement the projects, both the categories. Because decisions are taken not only at the bureaucratic level, but decisions are taken at the time of implementation of the projects also. However, there is a caveat. I am assuming that there is no corruption. The suggestions that are being given can be implemented only in case we work with honesty and there is integrity at all levels. Now, the first point which I feel is that the decision makers should be committed. They should be emotionally attached to the project or the task at hand which is given. They should have that sense of ownership with the project, and also they should be keen, they should be enthusiastic to the task of contribution to the society and to the nation. That energy which they show in execution or their decision making and the way they work should be infectious. It should motivate people down below. And they should be sensitive to the delays that are caused and the impediments that are created in the smooth working of the people on ground. I'll give you a simple example. In the year 1990, the government of India realized that China has brought their transport infrastructure very close to the international border with India. So there was a requirement to construct roads also on our side of the border. What the government did was they constituted a committee which was known as China Study Group to suggest the roads which should be taken up for construction. The committee or the China Study Group took 8 years to decide on 10 roads which need to be constructed. Thereafter, the orders were given to construct those roads within 2 years. Rightly speaking, it should have been the other way around. 1 to 2 years to take the decision. After all, it was a national level decision, a strategic decision which had to be taken. The roads had to be identified, and India is a vast country. So therefore, yes, 1 to 2 years you could take to take that decision. There are a number of factors involved, number of states involved who have their claims, who have their varied interests. Yes, you could take time. But it cannot be this way that you take time to arrive at a decision of up to about 8 years, and then you tell those people who have to implement the projects to take only 2 years to complete those projects. So therefore, the people who are there at the helm of affairs should have that commitment. It should not be just another task, another file that has been given to you, and that they try to pass that file in it. The next should be the person who is taking the decision should have an understanding of how the work will be done. Now, when I was talking about these 10 roads which had to be constructed, they had to be constructed in a mountainous terrain, in plain areas, and these were roads to be constructed ab initio. It is not that the roads are already existing, like the road from Parvanu to Shimla. The road is already existing, And if you have to make it a 4-lane highway, you could attack it at different points and start the work simultaneously. This was a work which had to be taken ab initio, and therefore you had to start from one point and sequentially progress the work. But what happened? They said, no, we don't care. Just construct the roads in 2 years' time. And we being in the army, we had to take up that challenge. We couldn't say, no, it cannot be done. That is our work culture. So what we did, we innovated on ground. We constructed helipads along the length of the road at different intervals. That means if a road was about 50 kilometers long, we constructed about 8 to 10 helipads. At each helipad, we deployed manpower, we deployed dozers, we set up workshops to repair the equipment, to assemble the equipment. And then, with the help of helicopters, we first dismantled the dozers. With the help of helicopters, we took the equipment, heavy equipment, to those helipads and started working in both the directions. From one helipad, we attacked the road in 2 directions, one coming towards the start point and one going towards the end point. It was a mammoth task and very, very difficult task. Just imagine the plight of the people who had to walk along the tracks to reach the helipad and then start working over there. No other infrastructure available. They are totally cut off from the civilization, from their families. And the human cost involved in giving such orders is seen to be believed. I used to sign 5 death telegrams every month. It was a very, very painful task when we used to do that. Then the next point which I would like to highlight is that the decision makers should be pragmatic about abiding by the statutory requirements. There are requirements that in case you are constructing a road, you should publish a notification in the press, in the newspapers, so that in case anybody has got an objection, can come up and give their point of view, and you can take action either to solve his problem or tell him that, look, it cannot be done. We were constructing a road which was 57 kilometers long. It was in a remote area. The area was such that even if when you went there, you had to cover your face and your exposed skin with an ointment. Otherwise, there were insects which were known as dim flies. They would come and bite, and the whole body used to swell up. The people living on that road were primitive. The women were not even wearing the tops. And when we came and made a presentation at Delhi that this road is to be constructed, this is what it involves, we were told that your plan is everything is okay, but with your project proposal, you have not attached a newspaper clipping which says that the people living along that road have been informed about it. Total population along that 57 kilometer of road was 1,500. They hadn't even seen a newspaper. They didn't even know how to read a newspaper. Totally primitive people, but the bureaucrat wanted a newspaper clipping with the project report. Otherwise, he said, I will not sanction it. All I had to do was, this was in Arunachal Pradesh, all I had to do was go back to my headquarters, send my officer to Calcutta, get a report, advertisement published in the local newspapers there, take up that newspaper clipping, attach it with the project proposal, and then it was cleared. Now, how can a person who has to take a decision be such a lakir ka fakir? That yes, He should know that where the road is being constructed, what is the environment which is existing there. But no, he wanted his newspaper clipping, he got it. In the bargain, the project got delayed by about 2 months. Or the sanction to start the project got delayed by 2 months. Then there is another aspect, the financial regulations. These financial regulations are made with certain past experience in mind. But each project has got its own peculiar requirement. Now, the case which I was telling you about constructing the roads in hilly terrain, where we constructed helipads along the length of the road, and we heli lifted the dozers there to start work simultaneously along from different locations along the length of the road. Now, the helicopters were from our base, where we had set up base to start work. From that base, the helicopter unit was located about 1 hour's flying time. And thereafter, the helicopter, once it came to our base, when it took off, it could make only one trip to the helipad, where it had to go and drop the dozer or part of the dozer, come back to the base, and then it required refueling. Now, such temporary bases in the field require a particular type of pump to refuel the helicopter, which is known as Sudan pump. The cost is only 2 lakhs. I could sanction purchases worth crores of rupees, but since Sudan pump was not listed in the items which were there in the list, I could not buy that, and the financial authorities did not sanction it. The result was, every day the helicopter used to fly 1 hour, land there, pick up one part of the dozer, take it to the helipad, come back, and then go back to the site. And in hilly areas, the helicopters cannot fly after about 12 hours because there is turbulence in the air. Consequently, what happened? Because we could not buy a pump worth 2 lakhs, we spent crores of the government money to satisfy that financial regulation. This is not national interest. This is a clerical interest, and we have to rise above those things. What I would like to say is, in a government, there are 3 categories of people. One is a clerk. He goes strictly by the rules. Why? Because he does not have the intellect to think like an officer. There are officers who have the intellect, who understand the spirit of the rules, and then take the decisions. And they have the intellect to understand the spirit of the rules and take the decisions accordingly. But then there is a third category, which is an officer clerk. A person who has been given the status of an officer, but he has got the intellect of a clerk. So he uses his officer status to stall the projects. Now, and such officer clerks are available in abundance in the hierarchy all over, in the bureaucracy, as well as amongst those who implement the projects. Then the people who are there at the helm of affairs, they should be conversant with the art of decision making. Majority of the time, we learnt this art of decision making based on our experience. No formal training is given. But there is a need to learn this art of decision making, to master this art. I'll give you an example. My knowledge of engineering was not that good when I was, as far as sinking of well foundation for construction of a pier of a bridge was concerned. And I landed up there. The Lacey's formula, which gives the equation for working out as to how deep a well should go, is basically for alluvial soils. But constructing bridges in the foothills of the Himalayas, where it is soil mixed with boulders, is a different ball game altogether. The decision has to be taken by the engineer on the site. And when I went to visit one of my bridge sites, the site engineer asked me, he said, "Sir, I have gone this much deep. I feel it is adequate, but I would like to have your guidance as to whether I should plug the well here itself or should I go a little more deep." I'll be frank with you, I did not have that knowledge at that stage to give that decision. But I did not delay the decision. I said, "Son, you will get your decision by tomorrow." I came back to my headquarters. I had some very competent officers. I created 3 teams of officers, one under each structural engineer. They were put in different rooms. They were given specifications. They were asked, "Okay, these are the specifications given. We have gone up to so much of depth. Please let us know whether should we go further deep or should we plug the well itself." Next day morning, I called the 3 teams. I asked them to give their recommendations with reasoning. After they gave their recommendations, each had their different reasonings, each gave a different solution. Then I told them that, "Look, we are all working as a team. This is going to be my decision. In case things go wrong, my neck will be there on the block. You should not get emotionally attached that I gave this recommendation and that was not accepted by the chief engineer, but his recommendation was accepted. I have heard you all. My feeling says that this solution is appropriate and we will follow that." And within 24 hours, we were able to take that decision. So sometimes your technical knowledge may not be that up to date, but then there are ways and means of taking a decision. In such cases, when you are giving orders, you should be honest to yourself. Cross your heart and ask yourself, am I doing justice to my job? And you should have that courage of conviction that, yes, I have taken all factors into consideration, I have taken all precautions, and this is my orders. Yes, things can go wrong sometimes, but then you should have that courage of conviction and have that courage to take take timely decisions and not to stall the project. Another aspect which people who are implementing the projects and people who are conceiving, planning the project should work out is the contingency planning. Because when you are executing a project, things will go wrong number of places. Or things may not go the way you want it to go. So that contingency planning is there. The important milestones should be identified, and your plan should give multiple options at each important milestone. Most important aspect is that you should have your regular site visits. It should not be a customary site visit. It should not be a routine site visit. Whenever you go and visit a site, your objective should be clear. This is what I am going to achieve when I go out today. Second, how will the visit help the project implementation? And then, please remember, these visits are very important. Remember this dictum that whatever is not inspected is neglected. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, what I would like to say is, these are some of the points which I thought within about 10 to 15 minutes, which I was told to speak about, I could give. We must understand that when, as engineers, we are working for the national cause, our infrastructure needs to be built up if we actually want the country to progress. And teamwork helps. And we all have to work with a positive attitude and with honesty as a bedrock. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Brigadier Garewal, for enlightening us regarding the work which is executed in difficult terrains. Most of us have the experience of executing work in plain area or normal areas, but today we have came to know that what type of problems people who are working in difficult terrain, especially along the international borders, what problems do they face, and these are more or less resembling the problems which are being faced by people. The problem, I mean to say, bureaucratic problems and other issues. Definitely your problems are much more difficult and cumbersome than our problems. I think you have explained it very nicely, and I want to congratulate you for the book which you have published. It is available online. It is a reform in the education system. We will give its link, how to purchase it, on our website also. Thanks again.
Thank you, sir. For any questions, please put the questions in the chat box, and you can also raise your hands. So we have two panelists left with us. After that panelist, we have question answer round, and we will select the questions from the chat box, and some people will be allowed to have a one-on-one talk also with the panelists present over here. So now I will hand over this stage to our panelist, esteemed managed engineer Rajiv Huja, sir.
Mr. Rajiv Huja, the people who are working in bridges works, infrastructure works, needs no introduction. He is a postgraduate structural engineer, MTech in soil mechanics and foundation engineering. He is well-known bridge engineer in India. He has about 40 years experience in planning, designing of bridges and highways, and he is member of many committees. One thing which I want to mention specifically for the young budding engineers, he is very cooperative and helpful to the young people. He is accessible to them. He listens them very patiently and give them the, जिसको हम बोलते हैं, बड़ा स्टीक जवाब देते हैं और बड़ी अच्छी तरह से समझाते हैं. ये इनकी खासियत है. Generally people who have knowledge, they are not willing to share it. So now it is over to Mr. Rajiv Huja.
Good morning to all, and thank you, Mr. Ghai, for kind words. We had excellent presentations from Dr. Singla, and also the address by Engineer Mohammad Ishfaq was also excellent. In fact, I am pleasantly surprised that such officers exist in our country, and I wish we had such officers all over India. So whatever problem we are facing, we will not face, and infrastructure sector will get a big boost. Now they have shared their good experiences, and Brigadier Garewal shared how a constructive, positive and practical approach can solve the problems. I'm a design man basically, so number one, I will limit myself to design aspects. I have been working mostly with the EPC contractors, where design, that is engineering, is done by EPC contractor. And we have many bad experiences. I would like to share bad experiences. Of course, good experiences have been already shared. I will start with the EPC contract document, where the scope is defined in Schedule B and C. In Schedule B and C, you list out the length of the project, width of the project, number of structure, their specific requirements, what is to be done. And C is about project facilities, toll plaza, road furniture, etc., etc. So the scope is defined in Schedule B and C, and the design and construction has to be done as per Schedule D. Now Schedule D basically refers to our manuals, IRCSP 84, 87, these are the manuals. Now the practical problem which we have faced on, I would say, majority of the project, people do not understand the difference between Schedule B and C. When I say people, I am talking of authority as well as authority engineer or independent engineer. Most of them, not all of course, exceptions are always there, but majority of them are not able to distinguish between B and C and Schedule D. B and C gives the scope. It's very clear in the Article 2 and 4. D is not a scope. So what they interpreted, that something is not covered in Schedule B and C also has to be done if it is given in Schedule D. Now that's a wrong interpretation. I will give an example. Suppose you are constructing a very large river bridge, and in Schedule B and C, you have not talked about guide bund or production works. You have given length of the bridge, you have given, broad span arrangement, all those things you have already given. When contractor starts working, then he is told that you get a physical model or mathematical model testing done by some IIT and provide adequate production work and a guide bund. This is a practical example I am telling you which we have faced. So when we tell them this is not part of the scope, you have not mentioned in B and C, but he says it's mentioned in IRC codes. You can read IRC 5, it mentions about guide bund, or IRC 89, it talks about production works. So that is understood, even if it is not mentioned in B and C, it is understood. You have to follow Schedule D, and Schedule D refers to IRC codes. Now, and see, it's not a guide bund is a very costly item. Your bridge may cost 200 crore, guide bund may cost even 40-50 crore. So, how this problem starts, and I can give you many more examples where certain things are not covered in Schedule B and C, and these are insisted upon by authority engineer, citing example of Schedule D, and without change of scope. So it goes into litigation and delays the project unnecessarily. And till you don't conclude that matter, they don't approve your drawings. That's another problem. So how this problem starts? The problem starts from the DPR. The DPR, I'm sorry to say, and everybody knows, these are, not all DPR, but most of the DPR are done very casually. NHI has got a terms of reference for making a DPR. It's an excellent document. Then we have IRCSP 19, which is a manual or special publication for survey investigation and project preparation. If a DPR consultants follow these two documents and other IRC code, I can tell you DPR will be excellent. But reality is different. DPR is done, in a very bad manner. Many items are missed out. Many mistakes are done. For example, DPR gives you plan and profile drawing. I'll give you just one example. There are so many examples. There, you have to give the length of the vertical curve. Vertical curve depends upon the side distance. And we have a stopping side distance, we have a overtaking side distance and other side distances, and desirable side distance. And there is a bare minimum side distance, stopping side distance. Now in DPR, that plan and profile drawing has not followed the code. If he follows the code, he should have given a larger vertical curve length as per the desirable stopping distance. But he gives based on safe stopping side distance. Why does he do it? And when the contractor starts constructing, then he is told, you have to design as per the code, you have to provide desirable stopping side distance. Why DPR consultant has not provided? Then they tell these DPR drawings are only for reference. There's a disclaimer in the document, and these are only for reference and guidance. What do you mean by reference and guidance? You don't do your job correctly, properly, and you expect contractors to do it. And then another problem, DPR consultant gives certain proposal. Say for example, well diameter, pier size, or pylon height, or in extra dose cable state number of stays. He shows something. And quite often, without having any experience, I have dealt with the projects where DPR consultant had never designed extra dose bridge, never designed a cable stayed bridge, but he has produced a DPR drawing. When contractor designs, he employs an international consultant who is a very knowledgeable person who have done a lot of such bridges, and he gives his design. And the authority engineer will point out, in our drawing well die is 10 meter, why are you providing 7 meter? Or in our proposal, there are so many stays, number of cables. Why have you reduced it? Or pylon height, we have shown say 150 meter, why are you providing 130 meter? Without understanding that this is a contractor's design. As per, see, it's a engineering, procurement and construction. It's a contractor design. A contractor is not supposed to follow the drawings which you have given as it is. If that is that is your outlook, if that is the way you think, then why float a tender on EPC basis? You can simply, issue the drawings to the contractor and let him make based upon these drawings. And I tell you, months and even years are lost only arguing such things with the authority engineer. And authority does not interfere. That's another problem. I have seen in one case in Rajasthan, the work is totally stopped. That because of this attitude, we had meeting with chief engineer, secretary, and we convinced them that the whatever proposal you are asking us is not feasible to design. It's an extra dose bridge. It is not feasible to design. They wanted us to make fully integral bridge. And we employed our consultant, then another consultant, and who came out with same conclusion that an expansion joint is necessary or bearing is necessary. Without that, it cannot be analyzed. An authority engineer refuses. He says, no, I only want integral bridge. I don't want any joint and I don't want any bearing. And in spite of our proving to them by using international softwares like Sophistic or Midas, which are world-renowned software, authority engineer does not have a software. He only has a STAD software. And they are not able to analyze that problem. They are not able to check what has been presented to them, but simply keep repeating that you have to do what we want you to do, even if contract does not specify any such thing. I think 2-3 years have passed, that project is standstill. So there, authority has to, play a very constructive role, positive role. But for that, they should have a knowledge. Unfortunately, in these days, authority is depending, our employer, client, whatever you call, they are depending too much on authority engineer. Authority engineer also does not have the expertise, but the contractor's designer, he has made construction drawing, working drawings, he has up-to-date knowledge, or even international consultants are appointed. They are very good. But authority engineer does not have that kind of expertise. But he can raise the question. He can raise the, stall the approvals. And unfortunately, authority engineer does not interfere at all. This is my real experience on a few projects. They simply raise their hand. We do not know anything. So my suggestion and request will be that authorities or employer should develop their strong design group. It used to be there 30-40 years back. We used to design, we used to go to PWD, Ministry of Transport. They will have a good design cell. They will check our design thoroughly and approve it. But here, authority engineer can give any kind of comment. Now let us go to chapter 10, article 10 of a EPC agreement. Now here, recently I have seen the contractor is giving 90 days to submit all designs. Absurd and ridiculous. Whosoever has written that line doesn't know ABC of design. See, in an EPC contract, which may be 2,000 crore, 3,000 crore, you may have a road of say 30 kilometers. You may have an extra dose bridge, you may have a flyover, viaducts, interchanges. Such a complex project. First thing is you have to do soil investigation. And you may have to do 60-80 boreholes. In river, the borehole depth these days is 60 to 70, 80 meters. You have to appoint a geotechnical consultant, a good geotechnical consultant. Unfortunately, we have a severe skill shortage, whether it's a designer, contractor, government departments. We have a serious skill shortage when it comes to technical matters. So you have to appoint a geotechnical consultant. It takes time. You have to invite offers, you have to negotiate with them, appoint them, then they need their mobilization time. So by the time he starts the investigation, 1 or 1.5 months will pass. In river, he may have to deploy barges. The soil investigation may take 3 to 4 months. What about survey? You have to do a very good survey. At construction stage, you cannot do a bad survey. You have to do a good survey. That survey also has to be cross-checked by highway engineer. That alone may take 2-3 months. So the investigation phase will be 3 to 4 months. The design cannot be submitted without this data is given to a designer. And in a complex project, there are 100 types of design: a well foundation, pile foundation, pier, shape of pier, pier cap, pre-stress, extra doors, steel bridges, all kinds of things. How do you expect a contractor to submit all the designs, which includes investigation, in 90 days? Ridiculous. In fact, in all major projects, 6 months is a minimum time for design, what we call engineering. And if it's too complex, it should be extended to 9 months. You ask any contractor, ask any designer to the contractor, it's impossible to achieve. Now, but you have fixed that time without knowing the subject. When it comes to authority engineer, he is given 15 days time to give his review or observation as per the contract. And if it's a bridge project, he is given 30 days time just to comment. So you expect contractor to finish investigation and design in 90 days, and you give 30 days to the authority engineer, and that too not for approving. He may give some observation, return your designs to you, you go to the consultant, what EPC contractor can do, he will go to a consultant. Now consultants are also short staffed, unfortunately. So we expect them to give design review, revised design in 7 days. He may take 1 month, 2 months. When you give it back to authority engineer, he again says, I have time, I need 10, 15 days time. Again, he will give some comments. So the comments are raised in piecemeal basis. So it is authority engineer who has lack of knowledge, who keeps giving comments on piecemeal basis. It doesn't help the project. And at the site, work cannot be executed unless approval is there. So contractor keeps sitting, his people are keep sitting. In spite of that, I will just, read out clauses for Article 10. I have noted down. Now it says, no review oblique approval and or observation of authority engineer shall relieve the contractor of its obligation and liability for the same in any manner. So what you are saying, even if authority engineer does not review, does not approve, does not give any observation, it will not relieve the contractor of his obligation and liability. Now, how ridiculous is that? Why are you not fixing up responsibility on authority engineer who does not do his job? You penalize him. If there is a penalty for contractor, it will be fair enough to penalize him also. Dr. Singla and engineer Ishfaq, they all talked about fairness to the contractor, but it doesn't exist. In practice, ground realities are different. So such sentences should be removed. Authority engineer has to be made responsible for timely approval. Then another clause is, any cost or delay in construction arising from review, public approval by authority engineer shall be borne by the contractor. Now he doesn't approve, he gives comments which are not right, which are wrong, and then the contractor has to bear the cost. Very, very unfair. In all such contracts, there is a provision for proof consultant. There is a provision for audit from the IIT. So once those drawings are signed, authority engineer again starts checking the design. They don't believe signed by, drawings approved by authority engineer, proof consultant or IIT. They just ignore it. Then why to have them? And if you have them, then why are you checking? You review broadly whether the scope has been followed or not. Basically the length of the project, width and all those things. Why are you getting into designs? Otherwise remove proof consultant and remove IITs, you check yourself. So very, very unfair. And because of this, the contract have suffered, contractor suffered for a year. I know the cases. In one case, the design discharge was not finalized for 6 months because the investigation has to be done by contractor. He has to do hydrographic survey, bathymetric survey for a large river bridge. He comes out with some discharge. Authority engineer jacks up by 25%, giving some reason. He says your discharge is wrong. And you keep arguing on that. For 6 months, 7 months, you keep arguing. And authority is not interfering. And see, what we are discussing here, role of government officer in troubleshooting. If authority are knowledgeable, I am talking on pan-India basis, they should create their design cell. They should not lose their touch with the design so that they cannot be exploited by authority engineer. They should not give a free hand to the authority engineer. They should know what design involves. They should know at DPR stage, because DPR is prepared badly in spite of a good TOR, good codes. They miss out many things. They don't do proper investigation. For a large and complex river bridge, why physical modeling test and hydraulic, mathematical modeling test is not done at that stage? You expect contractor to do it. I will share one more example with you. In Assam, a project was planned with a bridge number 1, then there is a embankment, and then another bridge. The total length is almost 5 kilometers in a Brahmaputra river, 5 kilometers. But authority or employer wrote a sentence that after the work is awarded, this hydraulic model testing or physical model testing will be done by some reputed institution and scope will be reviewed. What are you writing? You should have done this exercise beforehand. So what happened? The model testing was done by, say, IIT Roorkee, and they declared that scheme, which was floated at tender stage, totally unsafe. They say whatever embankment you are giving in the center, with some guide bund, intermediate guide, 2 guide bunds right in the center of the river. He says it's a faulty scheme, and they demonstrated that this will not work and this will get washed away. So the entire scope has changed. Then department or authority engineer came out with some other proposal and told them this is what you should do. As a contractor, we objected to that. We told them, this is not a good proposal. Better you make a bridge for the entire 5-kilometer length. So this question of guidement, embankment, which require, a lot of costing in the beginning, then a lot of maintenance also, they did not listen to us. Because authority, again, what I am trying to insist, have no technical knowledge. They are simply following authority engineer. For them, authority is a demigod. If he says something, they just don't want to overrule him. Authority engineer is not always right. Yes, they give some good comments, we agree. So and they don't listen to the contractor. They think contractor doesn't know anything, and whatever contractor says, you suspect them. So because contractor is supposed to be cheat, fraud, I mean, that's unfortunately, that is the thinking which most of people have got. So they didn't listen to us. And we told them the proposal which you are giving will be costlier than a through and through bridge. If you make a through and through bridge, your life cycle cost will come down. Again, they ignored whatever we said. Anyway, whatever they wanted, contractor has no option but to, accept that. And that project is implemented. Now, change of scope is almost 300 to 400 crore because they shifted the location of guide band. A lot of there, I don't want to get into nitty gritty, but the cost increase was more than had they constructed a bridge. Obviously, it will go for arbitration, and I'm sure authority will lose it. So, authority must have a knowledge, should be able to distinguish what authority engineer is saying, wrong or right, which they can do only if they have knowledge. If they don't have knowledge, they will depend on authority engineer. And as Dr. Singla told us, a contractor should be respected. He is a partner. Just listen to him also. Solve his problem. But in majority of the projects, it doesn't happen. Then there's another one. Yes, I have told you that many authority engineers start comparing tender drawings with the actual execution. Tender drawings are for reference. Contractor is giving his own design, doing his own investigation. In river bridges, we calculate scour depth based upon a silt factor. Okay. Now, when contractor goes to a site, he does a very good investigation, comes out with a silt factor of say 1.5. But at DPR stage, they have taken 1 or 0.9 or 0.87. This is a practical example where we were told that you take silt factor as given in DPR. Your investigation may be wrong. Okay, you have supervised the investigation. We can do the borehole once again. Then that investigation samples they sent to one institution, and they also came out with the same result which contractor showed. They still don't believe him. No, you have to take 0.9. What is this? If you are so suspicious of the contractor, why to float EPC tender? Then at tender stage, you finalize the discharge, so we don't waste time. You even give scour level, we don't waste time. And then they are always suspicious of number of piles or pile dia or well dia. Oh, our dia was 10 meter, you are providing 6 meter. Our piles are 20, you are providing 12. How it is possible? And months are wasted. You say EPC, if you are so competent, if DPR designs are so competent, why float EPC? EPC contractor is giving a state-of-the-art technology. He employs best of the consultant who have practical experience. He is able to reduce the cost, and this benefits the government. The public money is saved. With your design, the cost will go high, but nobody cares. In one case, authority had shown it was again a cable-stayed bridge, and they had shown a steel decking. When contractor got the job, he proposed a concrete decking, which is entitled because he has to do the design as per Schedule D. Schedule D nowhere says you have to provide only steel deck, not concrete. They don't listen. For 1 year, there is a correspondence, and finally, out of desperation, contractor terminated the contract. Contractor terminated. He says, what I am doing? If you are not honoring EPC agreement, so I have no option. He terminated. Change of scope is another big issue. If it's a 4-lane project, contractor is told after many months when he has mobilized, he has started working, even designs are also done. In between, he will be told, no, there is a circular, you have to make 6-lane, bridge. Okay, in any road project, there are 40, 50 structures. Then they are requested, okay, you issue change of scope notice. As per Article 3 of EPC agreement, there is a procedure laid down. If authority wants some change, they have to issue a change of scope notice. After he issues a notice, contractor prepares all the details. You know, he has to prepare a parallel drawing, parallel design to justify the cost. He is giving only 15 days. Contract says, after issue of change of scope notice, you have to submit all the details in 15 days. So he does whatever he can do, sometimes based on approximation, which are returned, of course. You give the design. But no, and that is without issuing change of scope notice. It's only verbal. Verbally, he is told that change of scope notice is not issued at all till the cost is acceptable to the authority. It goes on for 6 months, 8 months. Now, contractor has done the design. His staff is sitting idle. His machinery is sitting idle. You are not issuing a change of scope notice. And he cannot construct with 4-lane original one because RFI is not accepted. Nobody accepts his work. So where does he go? He keeps writing letter and he keeps receiving letter, but nobody issues him change of scope notice. It's a let down procedure in Article 13. You issue first change of scope notice. Okay, when he gives the costing, his question, the costing should be based on schedule of rates, though it's not mandatory. I don't want to get into detail, but if you read the agreement, it's not mandatory. I mean, a contractor has a liberty to refuse that. See, in a typical, very difficult project, bridge project, extra doors, cable stayed bridge, schedule rates are not going to work. What is the cost of cable? What is the cost of construction? It doesn't cover. Or you float a separate tender if you think it is high. I tell you, months and years are wasted. Again, I would say, because of inaction of authority. Authority engineers, you know, he has such a power without any responsibility. So my submission is that authority engineer's power should be curtailed. He should be held responsible for delay in his action which affect the construction, and he has to face the penalty. And his payment should not be made based on the manpower he collects. Again, that's another shame. Every authority engineer, once he gets the job, he collects people here and there. And they have no loyalty with the authority engineer. They just come for 2-3 years, pass their time, make money, and they have their own vested interests. That's the unfortunate part of this. And contractor has to stand in front of them. They have no knowledge. And a bridge construction engineer also is a design engineer who checks your design. He doesn't know ABC of design, but he's supposed to approve your design. So his power should be curtailed. I mean, and you should believe the contractor. Of course, contractors are not angels. I won't say whatever contractors do is absolutely right. No. But majority of good companies do a right job. They have no, interest. In fact, what they want, fast construction. If the project is completed very fast, they are happy. And they will spend money from their own pocket also if decisions are taken fast, as Dr. Singla demonstrated. So I feel authority also needs some kind of what we call sensitize them. They should be educated on the EPC contract, what schedule B and C means, what schedule D means, how change of scope should be dealt with, and you have to be fair with the contractor. If you expect him to absorb 25-30% of the cost without giving him change of scope, how work will proceed, you tell me? It cannot happen, And if you don't trust a contractor on geotechnical investigation, I have faced situation where they say you have cooked up the results. Your silt factor is high, or you are showing sandy strata, it's a clay strata. In one case, the RE wall was constructed, and then somebody, bridge engineer, wrote a letter that bearing capacity which you are showing is, not achievable, without knowing the subject, because RE walls are designed based on limit state method, and the bearing capacity is the ultimate bearing capacity. And that fellow doesn't know ABC of RE wall. He says, and I had to spend maybe half a day, even more than half a day, in educating those people that what you are talking is different. And RE wall are designed like this. They don't trust. They say, no, you are showing sandy strata. In this area, there is a clay strata. Hundreds of boreholes were done 1 year back. If you are suspecting this borehole, you may suspect all the boreholes. Okay, he insisted. The boring was done again. It was sand, of course. But 2-3 months were wasted. They stopped the work. Why he should be given such a authority? He can stop the work anytime. Doesn't give you approval. And all the bad consequences are faced by the contractor. And that's why there are so many litigation and arbitration. You have to be fair with the contractor. EPC contract has to be modified. And the whole concept of appointing authority engineer, whether it's workable or not, has to be thought of and debated. I think I have covered most of the points which I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Ahuja.
And
You have raised many vital issues which most of the contractors are facing. I think a long discussion, especially where the authorities, those who are to take the decisions are available, these needs to be discussed on that forum. Before we asked Mr. Alok Baumek, he is very close friend of mine, to say something on this webinar, I will request Dr. B.S. Singla to hurriedly reply the questions how he had been handling the issues which have been raised by Mr. Ahuja.
Again, it comes the same point. It is the responsibility of the government officers how they behave, how the authority engineer can keep the files pending. Initially, when we started executing the projects, the model was for the DBF on DBFOT BOT contracts. The concessionaire was given 6 months as development period, appointed date, to fix the appointed date. During that 6 months period, he was clearing the site, he was designing survey, soil investigation. Every part was completed in that period, and the appointed date was the date on which the concessionaire was starting the work. After that, annuity project came. It was the same concept in the annuity projects. It was again 6 months development period. Then EPC contract came. In EPC, they carried out many clauses of the same BOT project, but the appointed date was fixed after 15 days, just after signing of the agreement. The contractor had very less time. Yes, the authority engineers create problems. The main reason behind this, that we have relaxed so much criteria, the rates are too less, and the competency of the engineers comes down. They don't have the knowledge about that. Initially, when the concept of independent engineer, authority engineer was started, it was based on some foreign culture. Some foreigners were engaged, even in India, in the initial projects. They were not taking any time. They were not even taking the orders from the authority. They refused the officer. No, I will not do. This is my power in the agreement. I will do it as per provisions of the agreement. As far as Schedule B and C is concerned, it is very, very clear in the agreement. As Mr. Ahuja raised the concept of DPR, it is clearly mentioned. It is only for reference purpose. So, it is the duty of the concessionaire or contractor. Just take that as for reference, but I have considered as a government officer. But the design and the scope was strictly as per Schedule B and C. The design shall be as per Schedule D, but the scope is restricted only in Schedule B and Schedule C. Sometimes, as Mr. Ahuja raised, the Schedule B mentions that the bridge should be steel bridge, this kind of bridge. When there is a BOT project, EPC contract, it should be left to the contractor. He has to design. He has to see which kind of bridge, which kind of foundation is coming, and what will be the dia of the pipe or anything. While preparing the DPR, it is a rough base. He has not designed anything. He has fixed the dia on the basis of his knowledge. When the actual design comes, he has to provide those, execute those work, and the authority engineer should be competent enough, and their criteria should be changed. Once I suggested the payment of the authority engineer, some payment should be linked, more than 50% should be linked with the progress of the contractor. It should not be released. They are not for raising the objections. It is for the government officers to hold meetings regularly and resolve the problems, get all those drawings cleared. And if the authority engineer is not clearing the file, he should be held responsible for that, for breach of the agreement, and action should be initiated against him. And as far as the COS is concerned, change of scope, I think NHAI has changed and issued some new instruction that you have to approve the change of scope if there is any change scope within such a time period. After that, there will be no change of scope. You do execute the work as per provisions of the contract. It will resolve many problems if it is done so, but change of scope should be approved immediately. Yes, I agree, as Mr. Ahuja said, we have never, even I have never passed a written order to that this is the change of scope you submitted. It only verbal orders are passed on a rough cost. The principal approval is granted, so that there is no wastage of money of the contractor for designing and all other things. Rough cost is approved, then the detailed change of scope is approved on the basis of the detailed calculations, so that the contractor is clear, has to execute this work or not. His work is delayed in that period. His work is stopped in that reach. He has to cover all this. I agree, Article 10 has limitations of 90 days, but these clauses were carried out from the BOT projects, HAM projects, which newly has been introduced. So there are, you have seen, because of these problems, what Mr. Ahuja has raised, NHAI has many claims, arbitration cases, and in most of the cases, the concessionaires are winning. NHAI is spending crores of rupees on the claims, but they don't take any action on their officers who fail to take the timely action, which should be done. They will save crores of rupees in the arbitration cases if the timely decisions are given. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. You have explained almost all the points, and ultimately it is concluded that the engineers of the authority, I mean to say government engineers, has to change their style of working so that these infrastructure projects which are being constructed at the cost of taxpayers' money, these get expedited and the public should not suffer. Now, Mr. Alok Bhaumik wants to say something. Now, I will request these people to give the time to Mr. Alok Bhaumik.
Thank you, Ghai Saab. I mean, this was an excellent webinar, and it was a treat to listen to eminent experts, Dr. B.S. Singla, his success story, Brigadier Garewal ji, his success story, and also I heard Mr. Rajiv Ahuja, my good friend. He has actually opened shown us the skeleton in the cupboard. And also the initial remarks by Mr. Engineer Atif, excellent. So I would like to say a couple of things. Firstly, about the whole issue, about the industry, construction industry per se. In my view, our construction industry and the practice, it has actually broken down and needs serious reforms. We need to understand actually what is the root cause of all these, the problems which is highlighted by all the eminent experts before me. We need to find out the root cause. And according to me, the root cause of all this is the fact that majority of us have not developed the problem solving skill. Neither it is taught in our colleges and nor it is inculcated in the industry. We are not problem solvers, troubleshooters, as you have very rightly mentioned. A majority of us are not. What Dr. Singla mentioned and Brigadier Garewal mentioned, success stories, they are small islands in a big ocean. Majority of us do not solve problems. And this is the crux of the matter. How do we solve this problem? If you really look at our engineers working, whether in government sector or in private sector, I am not here distinguishing between the authority engineer and authority versus the contractor. Whether you are working as an engineer with the contractor or with the authority engineer, How many of us can solve an engineering problem? How many of us needs a direction from our superior to tell us, what is to be done at site? How many of us are willing to take the risk of taking decision ourselves? Very few, I can tell you. I mean, in my 40 years of experience, I have noted this. Every one of us, no, majority of us, I would say, not everyone, would look for our superior to take decision on our behalf, and we are tuned to a prescriptive kind of a work where we would be told what is to be done and we will do it. We will not apply our mind. We refuse to use our common sense. I mean, somebody has to tell us what is to be done and we will do it. Don't ask me, to stand under the sky to supervise concreting. I don't want to mud my boots. This is not my job. This is the job of the contractor's mistri. Even the contractor's engineers do not stand at the site, during the concreting work I've seen. So this is the kind of environment which is there in the construction industry, and that needs to be changed. And if it is to be changed, it has to be changed from our academic institutions. We need to inculcate, or we need to have a curriculum where we focus on problem solving skills. We don't, in colleges in 4 years, we give a lot of information, but we do not teach them the value system, the problem solving skills and the attitudes, which in the industry, when you go, it helps. And it is the industry is just a reflection of what we have learned, and we have not learned in the industry. If we want a successful project, as Dr. B.S. Singla mentioned about the Eastern Peripheral Expressway, or even the Delhi Meerut Expressway, which were all success projects, and there are many such, but they are more exceptions rather than the rule, and they actually are despite the system and not because of the system. If we want a successful project, we require competent professionals to prepare our contract documents. We would require competent designers to carry out our designs. We require competent contractors and competent authority engineers and authority to execute the contract. Most importantly, in my view, we need a well-balanced and fair contract. When I say fair contract and a well-balanced contract, I mean that the risk element of the contract is properly allocated to the owner, to the engineer, and to the contractor. Unfortunately, our contracts are not well balanced. This is one of the major issues, which if you go to the FIDIC contracts, they are all well balanced contracts. They have been tried all over the world, and they have proved that they are successful. But what we do in our infrastructure contracts, we tweak the FIDIC contracts to suit, and we make it so unbalanced that the very spirit of the contract is lost. As Mr. Rajiv Ahuja in his presentation highlighted many of those tweaking, which has created problems. So, if any of the highlights which I mentioned about the competency of engineers, about the well-balanced contract, if any of these is a problem in any project, the project suffers, and the project suffers dramatically. To bring out of this sink, if you want to bring out from this sink, then you need a person like Dr. B.S. Singla or Brigadier Garewal, exceptional character, to bring it out. But that's not the intent. We should have some policies and some arrangements so that 90% of the projects by default should be successful projects, and that is where we need to focus on. So in short, I would say we have dearth of skilled contract managers in the industry. Forget about the design engineers and the executioners. Whether the contract managers, be it a part of authority engineer or a contractor, I find that we have lack of skill on the contract managers. When I say contract managers, that means the person who is actually operating the contract. He can be from the contractor side as well. He should have practical knowledge of the contract. Most of the people I find in the mega projects dealing with 600 crore, 700 crore projects from the contractor side do not have the experience and knowledge of the contract. I mean, they should have the managerial abilities. They should have skill of decision making. they should have negotiation skill, they should have soft skill, writing skill, all these skills, communication skills. I find many of the letters I receive from authority engineer is in such a poor English and poor communication skill. It is amazing. I mean, and most importantly, Mr. Ahuja mentioned about the contract. I would like to highlight about the about risk. You see, it is agreed that when we talk about risk allocation, usually we look at the employer, because the employer is the person who has given in the contract the allocated the risk. But also we should not forget that the contractor who is reading the contract before bidding, he also needs to understand the risk allocation and pricing to be done accordingly. He has the option of rejecting the proposal at the beginning of the project, but he doesn't do it. I think yesterday I found in my WhatsApp a lot of results of the major contracts all over, where I find that the L1 contractor, even in current scenario, where there is so much of unpredictability, where the steel prices have gone up, the cement prices have gone up, in all the projects, the lowest bidder is quoting less than the estimated price by about 10%, 15%. Why is it so? That means it is not the problem, or not only lies with the authority and authorities engineer, the problem also lies with the construction industry per se. We do not assess or assess the risk, and the contractors are not willing to sort of cover the risk in their bids, because with the fear that they will lose the project. So this whole environment, the ecosystem in the industry needs to change. I think I can go on, but I think there is a problem of time. So I would like to stop here, unless somebody asks me to speak, I can keep on speaking. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Bhomik sir, for joining this webinar. And you have a different dimension which you are discussing, and it can be discussed on separate platforms. Our total today's motto was that the government officers, it is a message to government officers to pull your socks up. So, because ultimately, as you raise the point, authority engineer nahi theek hai ji, design nahi theek hai, it is from the owner. If the owner wants the type of work, quality of the work, if the owner is accepting, the supplier will do the same material, and they will give you the same supply. So owner should pull their socks so that these improvements are made. And the conclusion of, no doubt, you mentioned the word regarding BH Singla, that it is an island. At least in India, we have shown that such islands can be made. Otherwise, generally people say कि जी यहाँ कुछ नहीं हो सकता, system ही ऐसा है. But he, in 500 days, by making the Eastern Peripheral Expressway, he has made the island, and he is the living legend. And he is available for discussions anytime on his mobile phone, on his email, and personally as well. So at least we should learn from him that if he can do, he was also a government officer. And everybody knows about E. Sridharan, he is also still alive. If he can do, any government officer can do. So only thing is that they should be honest, they should stand firm, they should polish their professional skills, they should be remain updated, and the most important is their integrity, and they must have moral values. No doubt ये हमारा एक बहुत छोटा सा अपराला था. It is on a very small stage, organized by us in a Chandigarh, which we call a village as far as consultancy is concerned. More discussions and brainstormings are required on this issue. You being sitting at Delhi of such a national and international organizations, I request you to bring it to the knowledge of the government authorities that these are the voices coming from the people. They should do something, and you should organize such more webinars on the subject. Thank you very much for all the participants who have joined us, and thank you Dr. B.S. Singla, Dr. Garewal, and my dear friend Rajiv Ahuja ji for joining us. They have especially You see, in this COVID scenario, I think people are avoiding meeting each other, and we have tried our best that at least those who people who can come and join with us, we should interact with them. So now I will request the organizers to present mementos to our key speaker and the panelists. Thank you. If anyone has questions, kindly mail these questions to us. We will reply these questions separately because due to it is a shortage of time, we have to finish at 12:30. It is already 12:45.
Now, I will request Madam Ritu Ghai, Director Finance of General Highways and Infracon Private Limited, to present a memento to our honorable chief guest. And I will request Indrajit Ghai to receive this memento on his behalf and hand it over to Janab Engineer Mohammad Ishfaq ji.
This is for you. I will hand it over to you whenever I meet you. I am grateful to you for sparing time from busy schedule and joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I will request Madam Ritu Ghai, Director Finance, to present mementos to the speaker and the panelists. Dr. B.S. Singla ji.
For joining us, and Nitin ji, sabha aapke upale se hua hai ji, otherwise it was very difficult to organize such a program.
Dr. R.S. Grewal ji.
These are the silver coins which was published by Government of Punjab on 550th birthday of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. These are the mementos we are giving. Thank you, Doctor.
Rajiv Ahuja ji.
Thank you, Uja sir.
It gives me an immense pleasure to inform that this program has been handily arranged by Messrs General Highways and Infracon Private Limited. Thank you.
Thank you all the participants who have joined with us. There were about 150 people who have actually joined, about 250 people have enrolled themselves. We will publish these recordings on our website also, and these will be available on YouTube also. And whatsoever questions you have, you may send it directly to us. We will request the key speaker and panelists to reply these questions. Thank you very much.
Dr. B.S. Singla ji.
Thank you, Singha sir, for joining us. And Nitin ji, sabha aapke upale se hua hai ji. Otherwise, it was very difficult to organize such a program.
Dr. R.S. Grewal ji.
These are the silver coins which was published by Government of Punjab on 550th birthday of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. These are the mementos we are giving. Thank you, Doctor.
Rajiv Ahuja ji.
Thank you, Uja sir.
It gives me an immense pleasure to inform that this program has been handily arranged by Messrs General Highways and Infracon Private Limited. Thank you.
Thank you all the participants who have joined with us. There were about 150 people who have actually joined, about 250 people have enrolled themselves. We will publish these recordings on our website also, and these will be available on YouTube also. And whatsoever questions you have, you may send it directly to us. We will request the key speaker and panelists to reply these questions. Thank you very much.
अच्छा वो मिल गई थी मेरे
ये हमारा मिशन है, जान है।